Thanks. Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of Tuesday, November 20th, 2018. Entertain a motion to accept the meeting. Motion by Pat to accept the meeting minutes from last meeting. Seconded by Babe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous at 5. 702. Application of Walden Woods Condominium Association, Inc., care of Sterling SVC, Inc., 589 Concord Street, Holliston, Massachusetts, for amendment to the planned residential development special permit on a 74.3 plus or minus acre parcel of land located westerly off Cedar Street, Route 85, as shown on Assessors Map 6, lots A, B, N, Q, and Map 7, Lot MQ in the RD zoning district. Attorney Fernandez, are you representing?
I am.
Then I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. This is not an amplifying microphone, correct? It just works for the
Yeah,
cable.
for the cable, yes.
Just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Might be preferable with as many people as here, if this comes loose, to just stand, perhaps, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So for the record, my name is John Fernandez. I'm an attorney, and I'm here representing the Board of Governors for the Walden Woods Condominium Association. There are 5 members of the board. One, Doug Hall, who's the president, is unable to be here tonight. He had a pre-planned trip out of the area and just could not rearrange. But I do have 4 members of the board here with me, available to answer questions that may be put to me that are beyond the scope of my knowledge. But I've been working with the Board of Governors for several months, well over several months, probably about 7 or 8 months now, evaluating the situation relative to the Walden Woods petition that we're before you on. And the petition that we come here on is a relatively straightforward one. It is a request to waive a provision in the permit that was approved back in 2005 that provides for sidewalks on most of the roadways within the Walden Woods condominium. There's nothing specific in, not one condition specifically in the permit that says there shall be sidewalks. The first provision in the permit suggests that it will be built in accordance with the plan, and the plan showed sidewalk and landscape strip, and that's how that gets drawn in to the special permit. So for purposes of tonight's presentation, and obviously there are a number of people here who are here as owners in the association, owners of homes in the association, and for purposes of this presentation, the Board of Governors is really acting at the behest of the vast majority of members of the owners of the homes inside of the Walden Woods condominium, and we can explain that at a later time. And there may be some who wish to speak here tonight as well, although we've tried to put together a presentation that will capture the essence of what's being said here. So by way of orientation, for those who may not be familiar, who might be in the room or watching at home, what we're talking about is the Walden Woods condominium, which is at the far end of Milford on the Holliston line, down Route 85, near the Holliston line, near Hopkinton line, the Hopkinton line, near where the bike trail begins down in that area. It's heading out of town on the left-hand side. There are 2 entrances into the property, exits into the property. It's a 165-unit condominium built in mostly 2 duplex-style condominiums, but in a much different than typical style of construction, but still 2-bedroom units. It sits down in that area, and you'll know that there's a quarry down there that still belongs to the association members, and they keep significant insurance on that. But it sits on an area that was 259 acres of land when this was proposed, 74 of which actually comprise the condominium development. The other 85 acres, more or less, are restricted conservation land with a series of trails and other accesses, and it completely surrounds the development, such that there will never be a connection of this development to another, nor development of the area around it. So for perspective, this project petition began in October of 2004. is when it was filed, some 14 years ago. And my daughter came home for Thanksgiving, and she and I were talking a little bit about this, asking what I was doing, and came to the realization that when this petition started, she was 13 years old and entering the 8th grade. She is now 4 years removed from college. That's how long this petition or this project has been underway, having been completed only a few years ago in 2016, with construction beginning in 2006. It took a year to get this permitted, so it was a very thoughtful project that this board and process this board went through to permit this project. It went on for several meetings, many meetings actually, over that year until the final permit issued. Now, there were conditions in that permit that talked about allowing this to be built in phases. I think it was 5 phases originally, and providing that the infrastructure in that phase that was completed would be completed entirely before moving on to the next phase. There were conditions in the special permit, and these are consistent with Article 6 provisions as well, that occupancies would not issue until all the infrastructure was completed. There were provisions in there that allowed for bonding, and there were provisions in there that allowed that the final occupancy in this project would not issue unless and until all the infrastructure was completed or a bond adequate was put forward. So the typical kinds of provisions that you would put into subdivision control and matured into putting into condominium projects were in both the bylaw as well as in the permit that issued for this particular project. There were amendments. Well, there was one amendment, the amendment that took out the over 55, and then there were several special findings, supplemental findings that didn't require full hearings because they were de minimis, one of which was relevant to the extent that as to the berm, it changed it from granite to Cape Cod, and the other, that was in, I believe, 2009, I think, and then I think around 2011, there was another supplemental finding that allowed a change in the phasing such that Phase 2 became 2A and 2B. Phase 5 disappeared. But there was additional language placed into that supplemental finding that said all the work required in phases, the prior phases would be completed, 3 and 4, before final occupancies, et cetera, were to be done. So it was reiterated that that work was to be taken care of. And there was a point in 2008 where Phase 1 being completed, the developer did come forward and ask for permission to not complete the top coat, the final infrastructure work, as would be typical in a phased-in project, because of the concern, and it was reflected in discussions with this board, that, as is typical, the heavy equipment coming through the project could do damage to that. And so there was a bond amount agreed to of $95,000 for the work that would be done through the subdivision for infrastructure. But interestingly, that bond, and I do have copies of it, it's in your file, provided only for 2 things, roadway and berm. It did not provide for sidewalks. And so as the project went forward with that $95,000, the bond only provided for those 2 things. And when the work was completed on the top coats and the berm, the bond was released. So this project, as I said, began in 2006. And as we all know, in 2008, the recession hit. And I was working with developers during that time that had significant projects like this in the works that they expected to be done in 5 to 7 years on an aggressive plan. They didn't expect to be going 10 to 12 years. But, and even the condominium documents we were doing at the time provided phasing for up to 7 years. We went back and we got everybody's permission to amend those condominium documents to go out to 10 or 12 years just because the slowdown in construction was resulting in the need to do that. And so there was typically, in this situation, as there was in others at the time, delays, slowdowns, and the developer, in an effort to encourage greater speed of sales, and he was doing well with this because of the uniqueness of the project, though, put in additional landscaping all around the project, including a significant number of trees, as well as an irrigation system to service those trees. There was a community garden done. There were other kinds of amenities added into the project that cost six figures and more to do, and did pretty up the project, make it more attractive, and people did buy in. And the reality is that some of that irrigation and some of those trees, now matured, sit in the area where sidewalks would be placed out on this site. So as the project developed and went to completion in its phases, at no time did anyone suggest where are the sidewalks in terms of stopping development. I'm not saying there weren't discussions about sidewalks, but there was no suggestion we need to stop development and get the sidewalks built out here. They were not built, and as that project then went on in its development over a 10-year period of time, homeowners, some of whom would testify that they were not aware sidewalks were supposed to be put in here. There is some development material that suggested sidewalks. There is other material that did not mention it. And one of the critical things I would always look for as an attorney representing anybody is to look at the budget, the proposed budget, the existing budget, and there was no provision inside of the budget for sidewalk maintenance, repair, replacement, insurance, or any of those kinds of items, snow plowing and the like. And so this development matured as it now exists today without sidewalks. Now we know that the roadway of Walden Way, which is the main loop that comes all the way around, and it is constructed essentially as a big U, a crooked U, with a small cul-de-sac here, another one here, and a cross street, Hawthorne, that's about halfway up the division. From Route 85 out and up to Hawthorne, across Hawthorne and back down, it's 26 feet wide. The loop where most of the houses is 24, and I'm sure that was a reflection of the fact that all the driveways and homes were going to slow down traffic anyway up there, more likely than not, and so those were built at a narrower width. The reality is that over the last 10 years, what has developed out here is a system that DOT would call, the Department of Transportation would call, a shared roadway system under their guidances, where the roads are wide enough, the speed is slow enough, the number of vehicle trips per day is low enough that it is adequate to allow pedestrians and automobiles to share the road. The standard that DOT puts in for a shared roadway system where there aren't sidewalks is that there are under 2,000 vehicle trips per day and that the speed limit is under 30 miles an hour. Here, the projected vehicle trips per day when this was built was at about 900. There was a traffic study done in October to kind of take a look at that, and the numbers came out between 600 and 800 trips a day into the subdivision or the condominium, which is some 3 to 5 trips per unit per day on average, which is pretty low, and that the speed limit in here is posted at 15 miles per hour. There was also a pedestrian count taken during that same period of time or around that same period of time, and the number of pedestrians observed on the roadways during that time were in the 10 to 20 per day range. So it's very light traffic, pedestrian, and it's very light traffic automobiles, which I'm sure contributes to the fact that the shared roadway system has worked out here. The issue came up within the last few years as to whether sidewalks were going to get built out here, and the population was polled by the Board of Governors on 2 different occasions, and on both occasions it came out that somewhere around 85% of the population was opposed to sidewalks being constructed because they felt the system worked. They appreciated the appearance of the neighborhood as they had come to understand and grow up with it over 10 years or however many years they had been there. There were several people who felt it should still be built, about 4% of the population, and the rest of the population simply didn't respond to the survey as to whether they wanted or didn't want sidewalks. There was also a connector to the clubhouse that was an easement that had gone across that they were using for other purposes. The developer paved that to connect this side of the road to this side of the road. And so over time, people have become comfortable with this design and the way it functions out here. And we do have the advantage of understanding in making this request that we have experience, the experience of 10 years. Now, Reno DeLuzio, who is a former town planner that you all obviously know and is a resident down there, did reach out to the police chief on this to inquire, have there ever been any pedestrian accidents reported here over the last 10 years that it's been in construction and built, including when it was under construction, or have there been any pedestrian accidents reported in either of the other subdivision or condominium divisions that don't have sidewalks? I think Zane Ridge is one, which I helped permit, and the other is Country Club off of Asylum. Neither of those either had reported pedestrian accidents. And I do think, in terms of the way Mass DOT assesses these things, the fact that traffic volume is low, streets are wide, speeds are low, that contributes to the safety of the pedestrians sharing the roadway with the automobiles that are out here. So the folks that are here today are here asking for your consideration, given the long history of this particular condominium not having been pressured to build the developer, not having been pressured to build the sidewalks as it went along, allowing and it being by reality developed without sidewalks, such that people have become used to working it that way and living with it that way, that they be allowed to keep it that way. They feel comfortable with it. These sidewalks, we all know Route 85. I mean, there are no areas out here to which pedestrians are going to be walking distances for amenities. There are no amenities out here other than possibly crossing the street, which I'm sure some do, to get to the bike walking trail. The main opportunity for recreation is out in here. This does not and will never connect to any other condominium development or subdivision. And so their hope is that you would see fit to find a way to work with this, to leave it as it is for the time being, that it has worked for 10 years and they would like to continue to have it work. Now, if you were to look at this as a shared roadway system, there are things that could be added to this that would make it more perhaps safe as well. There can be recommendations for signage about sharing the roadway, pedestrian warning signs, even signs about direction to walk. And these are very wide. You know, there has been discussion about possibly offering some striping out on the roadway. You know, some of you know I live up at the top of Purchase Street, at the very top, just before the Hopkinton line. It's 45 miles per hour in Hopkinton. It's 30 miles per hour in Milford. It's 65 miles per hour on the highway. What speed do you think people come by my house at? There are no fog gutter lines out there. There are people who pass on that road at 45 and 50 miles an hour coming down. There are folks who share that on bike and walking and running. And yet it seems to function. The point of it, though, is I went out and took a look at the distances on each side of the the yellow line, the no passing line. And those roadway travel lanes are only about 11 feet apiece without a gutter line. That's pavement to pavement. Now, I know that if I go down to my neighbor's house, it might be 12 there, it might be 10 and a half there, that it's going to vary along. But my point is that if we were to set aside 4 feet on these roads at 15 miles an hour travel, that that would tend to contain automobiles to a smaller area of travel. And we do know that part of the benefit of having sidewalks is it slows traffic because it forces people into a smaller space, typically. But that wider roadways encourage greater speed, more weaving, while narrow roadways, narrower travel lanes tend to discourage that and tend to keep people within the space that you want them in. So there is no striping out here, and that is an option to possibly be an alternative to sidewalks. And I would suggest that, you know, about 4 feet of that could be set aside. Now, I did talk to the police chief, the fire chief. He doesn't want to see the roadways narrowed in terms of infrastructure inside the roadway, but, you know, he would be perfectly content with any kind of other accommodation that would be made, so that the concept of the shared roadway system with additional signage that help to direct people, slow cars down in terms of speed limit warnings, as well as pedestrian warnings and the like. The fact that the special permit provides there is parking only on one side of Walden where it's 26 and no parking allowed on the loop on the street means that we should really be dealing, you know, occasionally there are going to be people parking, we know it, but that we should be dealing with just the pedestrians and the automobiles when doing this. So let me stop there with a discussion about the history, the interest of the association and the Board of Governors to see if we can find accommodation here, and be happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Thank you. Just before I'll open it up to the board, and I guess I'll start with my comments. Just to add a little bit more in terms of the history. And I think most of this board, I believe all this board was here when this came about. And the roadway width and the sidewalk were all part of negotiations with the builder. And they were a significant portion of the discussion that we had with the builder. And in fact, we narrowed the width of the roadway down with the understanding that we were getting sidewalks. And it was an important part of our decision as we went forward. And so I think that needs to be clear. I mean, this one compared to most of the others, this is probably the narrowest roadway, and we went back to the fire department as to how narrow they would allow us to put the roadway in and then have the sidewalk. The other thing that's important is that all of these are a dynamic situation. And the group that we have here today would be different if we had them here a year from now. There's going to be people coming in and coming out, but this board needs to consider what we believe is right for anybody going forward. And I think that was part of our decision when we first permitted this. We've had, outside of this group, in a number of the condominium associations in Milford, people sending us letters coming in, how did you ever approve this without putting sidewalks in? How is my son or daughter going to get down to the bus stop down at the end of the street? We don't have sidewalks. We don't believe it's safe. We reacted to that as part of our discussion with this in terms of doing that, and we believed it was the right thing to do when we did that. So there's this, for me personally, and I believe maybe for the other board members, there's a significant safety concern. I understand everything that you said, and I'm not denying that any of those things may or may not be true, but when you get letters from people in similar situations from wider roadways than this, questioning safety issues, you react to that, and you make a decision, you make a design decision that's part of that, and that was part of what we did when we permitted this this particular condominium complex. So I think that's where we were coming from with all of these. So I just wanted to bring those out.
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I understand the historical perspective that this board has taken relative to sidewalks in these condominium develops, as well as in subdivisions. I mean, we're a mature town. We're an old town. There are a lot of neighborhoods in our community that don't have sidewalks. And I think we have been, I won't say lucky, but I think, it's been experienced that we've had few pedestrian accidents. Most pedestrian accidents occur crossing roadways, not walking straight into traffic or with traffic behind you. That's well established in all DOT and other kinds of analyses, that the danger is really the crossing, not just the walking on the street. And to your point relative to prior negotiations, I had been told there had been some discussions. I went to the minutes and I spent quite a bit of time, diving into the multiples of files that back up this project, and I was not able to find those discussions to tell me, because it would have been helpful to me to have the not just anecdotal evidence of what took place, but some written historical on how and why certain things were done. I've been through, and again, I permitted some of these projects in town, and I have a sense of, I know the width of roads. Typically, 26 is, from my memory, the widest, and I was just looking at the sheet because it had been put together with, which condominium have and which don't, and I think the only one on this list that has it is Country Club, that was at 28 at certain locations, and they don't have sidewalks, and they're a bit more of a twist and turn of a location than this one is, and so I do understand that, and I do understand the safety issue, and please recognize that we are here respectfully requesting this, understanding that you are elected officials who represent the entire community and have a value system that drives what you do. But as in all situations, you look at certain unique circumstances and you try to decide, am I locked into one particular way of thinking, or are there other alternative ways to look at a particular situation? Everybody here understands that you have been elected to make these decisions, and they're not easy decisions, and we understand there'll be transient populations that come through. But again, this is a 10-plus-year-old development where people have come and gone, and people do, sort of reflect the interests here. This is sort of an age-in-place, it turns out to be, kind of community. There aren't amenities that necessarily attract families. That doesn't mean children won't end up in here. Doesn't mean there may not be a few children in there now. And certainly we know generationally, grandparents will have children come into to visit them. So I'm not suggesting that shouldn't, that's not the case here. What we're trying to suggest is that there are unique circumstances that apply to this particular condominium. If we have to put in sidewalks, something people have come to be used to, as the look of their condominium is going to be changed. There will be significant removal of trees. The irrigation system is certainly going to be disrupted that services that. And I'm not saying that it should have been put in where it was, but it's what they've come to be used to. And I can't tell you that the developer, if he has to pull all that stuff out or trim it back and it's going to die, is going to be obligated to put it back in exactly the way it is. Now, maybe there could be private discussions about what should be going or not going, but this has gone on for so long that we come to the point of understanding, as we've seen in other condominium developments, that it kind of works. It does work the way it is. It's not a speculation. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, comments from the other people on the board?
Oh, I,
Go ahead.
okay,
Thank you. John, when we look over a decade plus since, and I think the only thing that I can remember is the five of us were here. But if I look back, I think over the course of, from start to finish, we had three different town engineers, three different building inspectors.
Absolutely.
So regrettably, I think the unfortunateness of this, something fell through the cracks. When we, as Joe said, I think in our minds, we assumed and everything that was discussed along the way, and we had a great many discussions, and there was a lot of trade-offs, and we go back, it was first an over 55. Then he was putting into a fund for the Pheno Field, updated their lights. And then, you know, there was one thing trade-off after another, and then ultimately at the end, I believe he finished the bike path. So, I mean, Again, there's been a lot of modifications along the way. Clearly, something fell through the cracks. Consistently, yes. I know since probably the last 15 years, maybe more, a lot of the PRDs we've required to have at least one sidewalk. Also, along the way, with the MS4 regulations, a lot of the pavement started to shrink. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. So, and again, I agree with Joe. At the end, we always assumed, and not being an enforcement department or an enforcement agency, we don't go out there into the field and say, hey, wait a minute, why isn't this done? We rely on the field to suggest that everything has been completed. Like I said, over the past 10 plus years and multiple changes of management, things fell through the crack. That's clear. Is it your fault? No. Is it our fault? No. So, I mean, to that, you know, I think you have an unfortunate circumstances right now. With that said, me personally, I won't waive the concept of eliminating a sidewalk because I have to remain consistent to those that have come concurrently with you, before you, and obviously after you. Would I be willing to do a hybrid, as you spoke, in a shared lane that was definitively marked? Not so much with signage. I'm not a huge advocate of additional signage. It just seems to get in the way. But, you know, even I think as you travel Main Street, you definitely see what I consider a bike path, shared road. Something like that, I believe that clearly does not do anything in terms of additional burden to what they consider aesthetically pleasing today. You're not going to disrupt any of the trees. You're not going to disrupt any of the irrigation system. But what you are going to do is you're going to end up with a definitive, in my mind, a definitive walking path that should satisfy those who don't want sidewalks and those who do. Because now you have a definitive area that you can call a safe haven, if you will. And you're not doing anything, and I don't really know what the long-term or short-term cost would be for having that striped. But I can tell you this, we all know it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than putting in curbing. So forgive me for saying I'm willing to work with you, but I can't eliminate the concept of a sidewalk. But I'll be more than happy, you know, if you can come with a plan or you agree to a plan that shows, just as you previously discussed, that's just me. And again, I think that's the best compromise that is the least intrusive to what you've all grown to love and appreciate. But again, I have to think of what happens if in 10 years I want to be there. I know, I don't walk, so you know what? You're probably right, but my wife does. So, like I said, we have to now consistently look for the future. And again, I have to look at other subdivisions that have come before you and will come after you. And regrettably, to us, there should have been a sidewalk. I can't speak to why there isn't, and I don't want to go down the path why there isn't.
You don't either.
But like I said, I'll be willing to be fair, and that's, you know.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, two things. One, I'm glad you mentioned it because it's important to understand that you are not an enforcement board. There are other boards beyond you that have enforcement authority. The zoning board has certain enforcement authority. Board of Selectmen has certain enforcement authority. The way your board works in these kinds of situations is a delegated authority. And what it requires, unlike in other kinds of situations, is that there be a connection between, the departments in such a way that the engineer is talking to the building inspector, building enforcement officer, the building enforcement officer is talking, some tagging is going on inside the building jackets that say, hey, this permit requires certain conditions be met that haven't been met, and yet so that certain things don't happen. And I don't give that history to suggest anybody did anything wrong, or certainly not intentionally wrong, but to explain how we get to a point where after 10 years there are still no sidewalks, and we gain the experiential opportunity to see that it functions. And to the point of what you say, Mr. Kennelly, one of the things we have considered is that there is enough width here to take 4 feet, stripe it, with either just a straight line and a center line, so the cars know where they're supposed to be, or the striping that includes some hashing that, you know, says this is intended to be an area where cars do not travel. And we think that would work as a compromise here around the entire division, because cars come in slowly. And I've spent time out here myself. I'm going to tell you it's nothing more than anecdotal, but I can sit there for an hour and not see a lot of traffic, and I can sit there for an hour and watch cars come in pretty reasonably in terms of speed. And everybody does slow down as you get up into this area. So, you know, 11 or 10 of travel lane is not, in my situation or belief, unreasonable. This is not a complex, by the way, that sees a lot of truck traffic. It's gas. There's no oil trucks that come in here, so it's the occasional moving truck or the
Yes.
delivery van that comes through, and that's about it that comes through here. So we would be certainly amenable to, as opposed to a full waiver of the sidewalks, a waiver that has a condition that in the alternative, that a center stripe and a side stripe of 4 feet on one of the sides be put in place, which I think, again, would contain traffic and provide an area where cars know they're not supposed to be and where people would know they could be.
Other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I did drive up there twice, just to see what it was like. I wanted you to know that the entrance is lovely. You know, could be lit a little bit better. But I did drive all through there, and then it was a Sunday afternoon, and then people were coming in. Then I went later on another day and at dusk, and I found that there was this handicapped fella that had a mobile, and he was walking his dog.
Yeah, he's out
And I kind of struck me a little bit that there wasn't anything there to provide for a handicapped fella. So I did take that trip up there. It's a very beautiful area, and I can understand the compromise. I know what Patrick has said, that we've really put the old gauntlet down and have said you got to have a sidewalk on one side, and we've done that all the time with all the different people. Associations. But I do like the fact that we can work together and have that white line go up the road on both sides, and that, what?
Be one side.
It's only gonna be on one side?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
The only requirement, if I recall, was we were only
It's
looking
only
at
on
one
one side,
sidewalk.
okay, my mistake,
When,
okay.
with the subdivision. It was
All right.
only one side anyhow.
But, you know, as part of the planning board, Pat was correct, we've been through a lot with this particular condominiums. But I feel that if we could all work together, I think we could work something out. And with that,
Any other questions, board?
any other questions?
Dave? John?
I've gone over this in my head a number of times. Thinking about it, looking at both sides of the argument. If this had been a condominium that wasn't a complex, that wasn't a residential complex that wasn't full, I would have a different thought about it. This is one that's been full. It's totally run by the residents themselves. And I'm a great believer in the majority is the rule. Yeah, it slipped through, and it shouldn't have. I've seen other things slip through that I wouldn't let go, where it's going to cost the town money or something, and I definitely wouldn't let it go. This here, I like Pat's idea of the compromise with the walking path. Route 16 is coming in now with when they do this reconstruction to the hospital is with the bike paths there, and people are recognizing these paths now that are made for bicycles and stuff like that. So they're kind of learning. It's a new
It's a shared road.
it's a new phase. It's a new phase in learning your driving conditions. Again, it is beautiful up there. I've been up there a number of times myself, just going through. I think it's one of the nicest places around there to do it, and I don't see any problem with. Again, if it was something that was detrimental, we have sidewalks on our subdivisions across the street from the high school, but the sidewalks aren't plowed in the wintertime. The kids are walking on the streets in the wintertime. The kids are walking down Highland Street, which has no sidewalks at all, in the wintertime, which is coming from the far end. And I don't think there's a safety factor that's there. Yes, you can put everybody in a bubble and protect everybody all the time, but I don't see a safety factor in the in a planned residential community, especially where there's a lack of kids. And I'm sure the grandparents don't let the grandkids go too far anyway, because I know I don't let mine in. So I do like the idea of the Mark Lane. I think that's a great concept. But again, we got a number of people here. I'll reserve the rest of my comments until after I've listened to the rest of the people.
Thank you.
People from,
John, have anything to say?
no, John?
No, he
John's all
says
set.
go.
Is there anybody in the audience, this is a public hearing, anyone in the audience that would like to speak on the matter?
Well, I got it right for you.
I guess you did.
Rena?
Just let us know who you are.
Yes. For those of you who don't know me, why do you use this? My name is Reno DeLuzio. For this past 6.5 years, I've been a resident of 148 Walden Way, and I'm a former Milford town planner. And I've been assisting the association on this issue as well. And John Fernandez just took probably all of what I was going to say in better presentation that I could make. So I'm going to add just a few things that I think you may be aware of, but from a perspective of a planning point of view, and you know, this is not a subdivision; it's a planned residential development, and as the members of the board said, it's self-regulating organization, and speed limits can be controlled more in a planned residential development than it can be in a public way or a subdivision road. And we talked about signage and additional striping, and that's all possible as well. I gotta go down my list now. Another feature of the association is that it has a website and an extensive email list of all the residents there. So that's a communication that's necessary for not only promulgating rules of the road, but reinforcing them as things slip and you need to remind people of what the roads are. And that is not the case with subdivisions. So I guess the bottom line is that this is a case where one size does not fit all. It's a unique situation. We've had circumstances that got us here. We think that based on the attitude of the board, we can work out a compromise where we don't have to install the sidewalks. So I hope you would approve the petition.
Anyone else wish to speak on it? Just a point, in terms of shared use, multi-use facilities, and this is my opinion, but it is a professional opinion, in that I've done these. If it's the board's decision that they want to go ahead without doing the sidewalks, I'm somewhat hesitant in terms of markings for multiple reasons. One, we're talking about 24 feet, losing 4 feet for a sidewalk, and markings puts you down to two 10-foot lanes, which is somewhat difficult. And I believe it gives a person that's walking in there perhaps a feeling of comfort that they don't really have. There's no real separation, and it doesn't provide you with that type of. I believe people need to be vigilant when they're walking in a road, and by marking it, there may be a feeling that in fact they have some sort of protection that's not really there. So I would hesitate to think that marking it somehow changes that dynamic. So if you're using a shared use, and if you see bike lanes that are shared use, effectively there are signs saying bikes have the right to use the lane as much as cars do, and that's the mechanism that's used, not a separation. So I personally have a real hesitancy in terms of, I think we could be making a situation that I don't believe is as safe as I want it to begin with, making it even worse if we do the markings. And again, that's my opinion of doing that. With that, I'll entertain a motion if we don't have any other questions or comments. Certainly go.
John. Sorry.
I want to thank you for,
Name and address, please.
Marilyn Spivak, 11 Walden Way. You heard from me with my presentation that I dropped off to all of you. I just want to say that I thank John and our Board of Governors for the extraordinary work they're doing. And I think all of you sort of mentioned it. This is a very unique and amazing community. And I'm sort of a newcomer. 2.5 years my husband and I have been here. We have 2 small grandchildren, and we have a grand dog. We have a daughter that walks the dog constantly, and even I walk the dog, and sometimes I walk the grandchildren. I have never, ever felt unsafe, ever. I think people are extraordinarily respectful. I think that everyone has a voice in our community, and it's a very respectful community, and we care. And you drive up the streets and you can see that people do care. I was so upset because I was one of the people, my husband and I, were one of the people when we first bought, and we had a very fine attorney. There was never any indication in the marketing materials that we received from a real estate lister and seller, the listing broker and the selling broker, not a clue about sidewalks until we went to our first board meeting. And we said, what are you talking about? And I know a number of the residents who moved in the past few years ever heard the word sidewalks. So that's what put me into a mode of writing that letter and presenting that package. And I applaud the idea of a walkway, of the, as you travel around newer communities, that's the in thing to do, is to have a line up the road for bikes and pedestrians. So if we could seriously consider that and never have to think about a sidewalk again, then we would, I think, be very happy.
No. Anyone else, Joe? Joe, anyone else?
Anyone else?
Yes, Larry?
Well,
Larry?
yeah, I think
Go
he's
ahead,
got
Dan.
somebody.
There's someone back there.
Anyone else? Oh, there you are.
I'm Beverly Finkelstein. I live at 8 Emerson Lane. I just wanted to add to the discussion that, first of all, I would be thrilled if we just had the line in the road that people knew was a bike lane and a path that I think would be a great compromise for us. But another factor that was really on everybody's minds is how much this would really cost us. It's much more than just putting in a sidewalk. It's the maintenance of it over the years and the plowing of it in the winter that would seriously increase our condominium fees. So that was another factor besides the trees and everything else that would have to be changed. That was on everybody's minds. I think that was a big factor. So the line, as you mentioned before, is a lot cheaper.
After going to take it under advisement.
No, I was planning on closing the
Make a motion?
public meeting. Yes, Larry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one comment. I tend to agree with the chairman that not having sidewalks is one issue, but then introducing alternatives that typically aren't applied in this kind of situation. They're applied in areas that have wider pavement throughout, where you don't have wide enough pavement to do the proper striping all the way across the road. I would think it would be better to just not have sidewalks at all than it would be to introduce the striping, given the widths that you have in the development. That's not to say that I don't think the sidewalks should have been installed in the first place, because I do, but given the choices the board has to make, I have the same concern the chairman has, that introducing some hybrid striping system may end up being actually more dangerous than just leaving it the way it is without sidewalks altogether.
I disagree.
I don't see the
I
danger.
don't see that at all. The
Well,
width of the,
that's-
hold on, the width of the road is the width of the road. Presently, cars are utilizing the road as well as pedestrians. And I'm told that there has not been any incidents. What I'm asking for is, if, not a tremendous amount, because I'm not a huge advocate of signage, but what I do want, not so much for the residents, but perhaps for the delivery drivers, to understand that in this development, it's a shared road system that allows not only vehicle traffic, but pedestrian traffic. To me, I'm trying to make it safer and eliminate the threat. Again, if it was up to me, and it was up to us back in the day, we thought we had a sidewalk. So forgive me. I don't. And am I willing to say, hey, no sidewalk? No. Because then the next 10 of them that come in front of us are going to say, you said no sidewalk for them. I don't want to do that, and I won't do that. And again, there's been other subdivisions that have come in front of us and asked us to waive it. I won't do it. So for me to save face, and maybe I'll just be honest, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm eliminating a sidewalk. What I am saying is I'm going to come up with a hybrid plan of a shared road that the state has adopted. And again, I've asked John, and I'm willing to look at options that make sense for everyone. But to me, having a single line, and maybe it's only 3 feet wide, with some signage that indicates to the traffic, and again, I'm not concerned about you guys, because to date, you haven't hit anyone. I am concerned about the delivery drivers, and more importantly, my pet peeve, the Amazon drivers, okay? That's what I'm concerned about. So, to me, I'm sorry. I would like to come up with a hybrid plan that works for everyone.
Well, let's get something straight here. The state hasn't come up with that being the shared use is looking
No,
like that.
it's
So let's not say the state's done that. That's not where I'm gonna go, and I'm not signing on to anything that looks anything like that, because I know that isn't the case.
Okay, the state, forgive me, Joe. It's a shared roadway in terms of bicycle traffic. Forgive me, I misspoke myself, but I think the concept.
It's entirely different.
I'm talking about the concept, not necessarily the
Well,
practicality.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, the state's municipal guidance for roadways does provide for shared. It doesn't necessarily provide for striping as a part of that, but it does. But there are stripings that go on for both pedestrian traffic as well as for bike traffic, as a part of a design of shared roads. Certainly part of the complete streets, and of course we do striping for sidewalks crossing, because that is the most dangerous location. So, what our suggestion was, honestly, and look, I saw it on Purchase Street. When we paved Purchase Street and widened it a little bit, and the pavement was good and solid, zoom, right? The cars are going faster. You narrow the lanes, cars go slower. You give some area that's designated that is an area cars don't go into as much as pedestrians or bikes do. And I think that's a good thing. It may not be the professional desire of an engineer to have it look that way, but our our feeling was that as a substitute for the sidewalk, narrowing the traffic lanes, congesting them to where there was designated areas to travel as opposed to just a roadway that has no markings, and having the area that would be set aside was actually a better shared roadway plan than not having anything at all. I mean, I defer certainly and respect the professional opinions of the folks involved, but we felt that was a reasonable way to handle the matter.
Still available? Yeah, go ahead, but this will be the last one as far as the public. I'm not.
Oh, yeah, of course, sorry.
Jerome Levy, 152 Walden. I'd just like to point out to the chair that your point may well be very valid as far as the advisability of a bike lane or not. We'll call it a bike lane. But I'd like to point out that if it turns out in further study that we install these lanes and they don't work out, it's fairly easy to remove striping. Not so much for a sidewalk. Once a sidewalk is in, you're talking about a significant disruption to infrastructure. You're talking about significant expense. You can't, quote unquote, undo that. But to your point, it may well be that it doesn't work out as well as you would like. I think it will. I agree with Mr. Keneally. But in the event that it doesn't, it is something that can be reversed relatively easily, if that should become necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would emphasize that, again, we're talking about a contained situation here. The nature of this is such that it is a neighborhood. You know, Vinnie Liberto used to say that he wished everybody drove as carefully and at the right speed in all neighborhoods as they did in their own. That's really the only traffic that's coming into here is the owners, the visitors, and yes, there are delivery, but to the extent there's delivery, making sure we've contained the travel within lanes, I think is a bonus to the project, not a detriment. But thank you for your consideration.
Entertain a motion?
Joe, just on a procedural,
Yep.
if you close the hearing and the board is leaning toward some hybrid approach, you're kind of stuck. I would think you may want to keep the hearing open if a hybrid seems to be the tendency of the board. My suggestion would be to continue the hearing and in the meantime, we can, at the staff level, at least review some hybrid proposals, so at your next meeting, you would have something to consider. Otherwise, you've kind of blocked off the ability to submit something because you've closed the hearing.
Yep.
Just a thought.
Is it possible, if we just close the hearing and adopt not to construct the sidewalks, it would be upon the residents and their association to want to put, whether they put in the stripe or not. I realize, Pat, that you want it, and I do too, but
But my bigger concern is the signage. Again, my concern is not for the residents. My concern is for those who do not reside in there, that they understand that they're entering a development that allows for share roadway usage.
no, I'm just saying.
I can't speak if a stripe is advisable or not. That's not within my wheelhouse.
I'm not saying it is. I says, you'd like to see it, I'd like to see it. I know Lena just said she'd like to see it.
My main concern is on the 26-foot pavement.
If that's if that's the way the board is leaning, I would just say keep the public hearing open and let them come back with a plan.
That's fine, you can
I agree
continue
with
the
that,
public
Joe.
hearing.
I agree with that.
Make a motion to continue the public hearing.
I don't agree with it, but that's fine. I'm only one vote. If that's the way
Yeah, no, I
the board
understand.
wants to vote, that's
either way.
fine. If that seems to be the flavor, I would
Otherwise, you
suggest we
need
do that.
You need a motion that was very
I'm
specific.
going to make a motion to continue the public meeting. I'll further make a motion, I need a second on that.
Yes.
Motion to continue the public meeting.
I'll second that.
Second.
And then again,
Who wants to be? Babe?
It doesn't matter.
Lena,
Lena?
We're all here.
then I would encourage,
motion to, motion to continue the public hearing,
December 18th?
Are you going to be
You have to ask
prepared
them.
to present a plan by December 18th?
Sure, I think that the plan honestly would be quite simple in that we would request the opportunity or the board to adopt 4 foot of striping around the development, perhaps at locations as designated by the town planner, town engineer, with appropriate signage located throughout the division.
I'm going to speak again for myself. I was more interested in the 26-foot, the area that has 26 foot of pavement.
Okay, that's
More
here.
so than it was the 24. I
Okay.
think the 24, taking away 4, you may be tight. Also knowing that that's where all your driveways are. I don't know if that's the most practical thing, and again, I'm just speaking for myself. Mine was more like I said, how you presented the 26. I think,
Here.
yes.
Okay.
And like I said, and I'm more concerned with the strategic placing of some signage specifics to the entrance and where you think perhaps it would be best suited for those individuals who do not reside in your neighborhood.
Yeah, we actually have a design that shows locations where we think signage should go, to be honest with you, if you wanted
And I'd
to
also
see
like to know what
that.
your signage is going to read.
Sure, and we have examples of that as well,
right,
honestly.
we'll-
If you don't want that tonight, you want it at a subsequent meeting?
Again,
The next meeting.
I'm like
That's
Pat, again, the entrance signage, I just don't wanna, I'm not a person who wants to clutter.
No, I don't want 50 of them.
Oh, okay, so that's fine. So why, if,
I don't want every 5 feet.
That's fine.
That's not what I
That's
want.
fine, Mr.
I don't
Chairman.
want speed bumps. I don't want inverted speed. I don't want any of that jazz.
right, so,
With staff to
Yeah,
to come up
if
with
Mr.
whether
Chair-
it's wording or whether it's a plan, John. Work with staff to come up with something.
think
We'll
what we can
schedule
do
it
is-
for the 18th.
I think what we can do is we can come
Stay
up
within the
with,
theme of what you already have there.
We have
We-
a
we-
motion to continue the public hearing till the 18th. We already did. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous at 5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Hope we have a happy.
People who brought the chairs in could
You
bring
need
them back
to
to the
look
other
at is
meeting
the
room, that would be
strategic place
helpful.
of your signage. But also, you guys have a specific theme there. So I don't want a sign that sticks out like a sore thumb, like it's a highway. That's why I think you
Yeah,
need the
I'm gonna
opportunity.
let them leave, Larry.
No, it's not a wheelchair, it's a motorized thing. Yeah, I saw that and said, whoa, maybe we do need a sidewalk, huh?
Accustomed to seeing.
Yeah.
That's why I'm leaving it up
Well,
to you guys.
that struck me right there, it really did,
It is.
you know. Okay, good luck.
It is beautiful, it is a beautiful thing.
Oh, it is.
Thank you.
Yes.
18th, yes. You do the same, ladies.
Thank you.
I mean, these are all pros, there wasn't a negative in there.
Take them
Have a
with
great
you.
time.
See you on the 18th.
Johnny.
Oh, I know it. You're welcome. How is she? Is she still in California?
she's at the house right now, but she was in Cal for 3 months in the last couple of years.
How are you, Nancy? I didn't see you hiding in the back.
Yeah, my daughter's in La Jolla.
Okay, what's next?
I didn't raise
La
it.
Jolla, in La Jolla.
We got no one to take notes.
I didn't raise your highway, your sidewalk. I worked hybridly.
Oh, it's awful, John. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Regrettably.
Give my best to your family.
There was supposed to be one, so it's not there.
It didn't get done.
No, it
And
didn't.
written up,
It worked out.
Long, short term and long term.
well, it all looks very good. January 13th.
Yeah, that's it. You don't have anything there.
Oh,
Had to work
we
with
are thrilled.
I love babies.
Dante Marble.
Have a great Thanksgiving, Nancy.
Yeah, you two, you're gonna be at Chrissy's?
All right, we got another meeting.
Yeah. Give her
Wait
my
for Larry to
best.
come back, otherwise we have no one taking meeting minutes.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Sure
do
we
that
wanna
for
do that.
Christmas.
No. I'm not responsible for
Take care.
midnights.
Take care. Have a very nice. Give my best to your family. How's that Beverly Swimer? Were you at this Were you here
I'm
last
sorry.
night at the, was Beverly with you? Yeah, but I saw you guys on television.
Hey,
I said it myself, I'm glad I wasn't there.
told you, Sicilian. His ex-wife was a Sicilian. She was a Sicilian.
great.
He had to go against.
Signing it saying it's a lot or not. It doesn't meet current zone.
I'll see you.
Were you here?
Where do they have lot lines? Are they trying to establish lot lines?
No, they.
Hey, Woody, what are you doing here?
I sent you an answer.
Hi, John.
I couldn't send it to you when you were.
No kidding.
Who are all these people?
No kidding.
What do you mean?
They established lot lines because they
Well, hey, how are you? Oh, were you upstairs with the sewer department?
How many people? Was it packed?
They're saying, well, that's what it was before. And I'm saying, no, it's not. We just
Is this yours,
didn't
Elizabeth?
have a lot. You had a chance
Are you
to
just
do it
helping out?
with all the property, and you didn't do it.
Oh, okay. They'll have to come back. They're already
Thank
out
you.
there. Are they out there? Those women out there? Nancy?
She told me the town owns this.
Yeah. See
they offer to
Nancy
buy it from
standing
the
there,
town?
tell her the woman. She's standing right there with the red
Can't offer
jacket
to
on.
buy it from the town?
Non-conforming use. You make that house a non-conforming use. That's the frontage.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
What's this?
Because he doesn't have it only, he's got 67 feet.
This is that.
This one would be fine. It's this one.
Yeah.
I do. I'm sorry.
I just hate the person who is selling the lot. I hate to give.
This is the one that, see, this was the
I don't like it.
Yep.
I don't
They
care.
own this. They could have, they own
It's going to do.
They owned
this
everything.
one. Yeah.
I know it's gonna go.
So, I mean, it's their creation. I don't give a But I'm,
Right,
but I
this
told
was
Larry, I
laid
said,
out as, because it had the frontage in the front.
I told Larry, I said, well, one thing I said, why is that 12 and a half? I said,
All right,
At a minimum.
everybody, quiet down.
if you're gonna lay it out now, I
Close
want
those doors.
one thing, but that.
Counselor, how are you this
I mean,
evening?
that's what the building looks like.
Very
If they don't
good.
ask- Yeah, if they don't ask for,
Everything is very good.
It doesn't
I'm
meet-
good,
doesn't meet-
Minnie.
Yeah.
It's good to see
You
you.
were happy they were for you.
They're creating it now, but they're saying that's what it is. So I have a building lot because it's an existing lot. I'm saying, no, it isn't. You just laid out, Silver Hill was never laid out before.
Yeah, that's right.
So you didn't know whether you had a lot or not. So I want an opinion from town council.
Hi, Joe.
on whether this is an existing
good.
lot or not. Because
Very good,
this was
thank you.
done, this was in the 60s, I
Same
believe,
to
that
you.
they laid this out. That still wouldn't have met zoning back then.
And she
So
is.
why should it have been?
I told you which one. The name is Dante Marble.
Can't.
I know.
I don't want to take meeting minutes. I gotta wait for Larry. Unless you want to take meeting minutes. You on the clock? You can. Yeah.
Oh, you're doing it if he was getting paid.
He's on the clock anyway, so.
It's going great. It's never gonna go great. Look at that, look great.
He knows. He said he'd be back. He told me he was leaving. He said he had to go.
Hey, there he is.
7:05, this is our 7:05 public hearing. Application of Ernest Capitos and Linda Nero, 40 North Vine Street, Milford, Mass, for approval of a single lot definitive plan on property located off Silver Hill Road and Congress Street, as shown on Assessors Map 22, Block 64, Lot 2, RB zoning district. Attorney Antonellis?
Good evening. For the record, Joseph Antonellis, on behalf of the applicant, with me tonight is Liz Minini from Barrier and Howland, who has been supervising project engineer on this. This plan is before you tonight as a result of a request for a variance that was submitted by my client, who has a purchase and sales agreement to buy the property. It is my understanding from my conversations with the town planner and from preliminary conversations with the board that the board was uncomfortable in submitting any kind of a recommendation to the zoning board, whether it be positive or negative, relative to a variance, because there was a lack of definition of the layout of Silver Hill Road, both the Silver Hill Road that connects to Whitewood and the Silver Hill Road that was the old way that one took the Silver Hill Road before most of this was developed here. Growing up in Milford, we remember we would take a right here to go down Silver Hill Road to head to Purchase Street. So this particular area was never defined relative to the road layouts in the town of Milford. So with the assistance of Barrier and Howland survey and some historical research, we have presented a plan tonight that would create a subdivision of one lot, which would define for purposes going forward the roadway that belongs to the town of Milford, being Silver Hill Road here, which has never been formally abandoned, it still exists. It's laid out, it's not traveled, but it is not formally abandoned. The line along Congress Street and then the line along Silver Hill Road. So what you see in the red line is in fact the property line that is being proposed. Do I need to take that? I apologize. There we go. Sorry.
Got it now.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So what you see in the heavy red line is the actual property line that we propose to exist to be the boundary of Congress Street, Silver Hill Road, and the extension of Silver Hill Road. And the blue line that you see inside is a line where we would be giving an easement to the town for maintaining the road for all purposes for which highways are used. We believe that the layout as presented in this plan is sufficient to provide adequate access on Congress Street, Silver Hill Road, and the portion of Silver Hill Road that is not used, but to the extent that the town chose to make it passable again, there is sufficient area within the plan to do that. And again, at the suggestion, in consultation with Mr. Duncan, we determined that the best way to handle this area here was to provide a driveway, a roadway easement, not unlike you get in some subdivisions. So the request tonight would be to approve the subdivision, which would then define the lot on Silver Hill Road for all purposes moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Antone.
Thank you.
A couple questions, comments, or whatever. Just in terms of the road layout, Silver Hill, I guess I have a question as to why the radius at the Silver Hill Congress Street intersection is not at least 20 feet. I believe it's 12 and a half on the plan. I'm not sure why that is, but it's being laid out.
That's actually very irrelevant to us for the client, so if you'd prefer to see it 24, we can certainly do that. I'm not exactly sure how that came about as far as from the surveying end, but.
And then I guess my second one becomes, that, to me, I see no reason. If we're laying out Silver Hill, it should be laid out according to the town standards now, which would be a 20-foot radius there now. The other thing is, I guess, I'm somewhat confused in terms of us laying that out, in terms of it being a subdivision or not, and that it doesn't meet the zoning requirements of the town for that what's left. So I guess I'm confused as to whether this is a subdivision. Is there a thought process that this is a buildable lot? Because to me, the next thing that would be on there was not to be considered a buildable lot as it currently
So-
constitutes.
That's my position is that it is a buildable lot.
So it's
My
real.
position would be it's not.
And my position is that it's a buildable lot because it is a parcel of property having no less than 50 feet of frontage and 5,000 square feet that was not held in common ownership with any other parcel at the time that the Subdivision Control Act and the zoning bylaw was accepted. So that statutorily under 48 Section 6 is a buildable lot for purposes of a single-family home.
So
I guess
we're not.
I guess I would somewhat disagree in that all of that property was owned by one owner at one point in time, and they sort of created that themselves.
Well, no, Mr. Calagione, then you presume that the Capitos family created Silver Hill Road.
I presume that seeing how the town never created the Silver Hill Road that goes straight through, and we're doing it now, that something happened along the way. So I guess.
And again, I understand, but I think there's a presumption on either side. Either the Capitoses created Silver Hill Road and it's not disconnected from their parcel, or the town created Silver Hill Road and disconnected the Capitos parcel from the other parcels. And I believe, from my history growing up in Milford, that it's logical to believe that the town created Silver Hill Road because those are roads that have been accepted, have been shown on the town's assessors maps, plowed by the town, used by town residents, not just by the Capitos family for the purposes of the farm. And while I understand that if it's merged with something else, then my argument is incorrect. But I believe that the logical conclusion is that this parcel was disconnected because roadways were built and separated it.
So we're really looking at this, and when we sat down with Larry, there's basically two ways for us to define the property lines, and this is from the surveying end of things. There's two ways to define the property lines for this particular triangular piece. One is an 81X, saying that we're not creating any new lot lines, we're simply defining the lot lines that are already there. Larry's preference was to go through a subdivision, and I think it is a much cleaner way to define those lines. We're offsetting lines that have been previously recorded at the Registry of Deeds, that I outlined in green. We're using those lines to create right-of-ways. So you're not really creating the lot's already there. You're just defining, it's just a different way of defining where those lines are.
I understand all of that. My issue becomes as to when and how, and as to whether that becomes a buildable lot or not. And I guess and I talked to Larry before, before I would sign the plan, I would want to know from town council what his take on it is, and to get a letter from him as to whether he believes that to be a buildable lot or not. That's my take.
If it's not going to move forward as a subdivision, I don't see why we would go any other way other than doing the 81X, in which case we actually end up with
Building permit in Milford if you do that.
That's not necessarily true.
Well, I think at the end point, we're all trying to get this cleared out as to whether we all consider this to be a building lot or not. You can do whatever you want. I mean, my end point is I want to know what I'm signing and whether I'm allowing that to be a buildable lot or not. And if it comes out that way and it's not in our purview and the town council says, yes, that's a building lot, and what Mr. Antitellis says is correct, then, it's out of our hands. But I mean, I believe it moves the process forward no matter what we do. But before I would sign it, I need to feel comfortable as to what I'm signing on to. It's a question that I have, because I understand what you're saying, Joe, but I don't know that I totally agree to it or not, just by the way things happen.
But other than
out
that,
there.
other than that question, the configuration of the lot is predefined, so would you be of a mind to approve it subject to town council confirming the proponent's attorneys? Because I've spoken to land use attorneys, prominent land use attorneys, and they have opposite opinions. I think town council is probably going to say what I had said and what Attorney Antonellis had said. But we could get it in writing by next meeting, but one way to do it would be to just continue the hearing until then and do it. Or to approve it subject to, and if we can't get it, then the note goes on the Mylar.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the way the layout was done, other than my other comment, which obviously I wouldn't sign it until that was cleared up anyways, in terms of the radius, I believe it's, would be an appropriate layout of that section. I don't have an issue with that at all. It comes down, for me personally, and I'm not speaking for the board, it comes down to that one other issue. So I have no problem. I mean, I think it needs to be continued because we need to get the right drawing with the right radius in, as far as I'm concerned. But past that, I have no other issue with the layout of it. I would also like to get an opinion from town council as to whether it was in a building lot or not, and what his feeling was. Anything else from the board?
Going on with my thing with the whole, been for years, is it's not a buildable lot, but seeing where it's being presented as a possible buildable lot, and this is going to be without a variance.
Well, the question of the variance would be where the house is situated. So we have a building envelope that we could place on this lot.
Well, it's shown, yeah.
Okay, so we can place a building lot, build one, and again, that would be based, remember, that we're burdened with 3 frontages.
Yeah.
So that would be the basis of any variance request, is that we're burdened by 3 frontages, which is a unique situation. Notwithstanding that, a house can be placed on this property without a variance. Okay, so I believe those are separate issues.
I understand that, but if there was gonna be a house, it would be a smaller house probably. I would rather see nothing built, but if something was to be built, I would rather have them go and get a variance and build something that fits in with the neighborhood, rather than to have a cottage in the middle of Western Center.
Again, and I'm not here to argue the variance, but
Okay,
the.
and I'm just, this
but-
is
but-
my opinion, and also, my opinion be in their design, if it is gonna be a buildable lot, that their driveway come off that curved section of, the curved section of Silver Hill Road that's not used now, and not go on to either Congress Street or, Silver Hill directly. Congress or
Congress is
Silver Hill directly.
Conceptually, I agree with that, what you just said. However, you'd have to probably have the guardrail moved to the center in order for that to happen. Because the guardrail presently, I believe, is right there at the edge of
It's right here.
Congress.
Congress Street, but they could come off of Silver Hill. In other words,
Do you want to show?
that's the back section. The driveway be put on the back section of Silver Hill Road, that's all.
Yeah,
Again,
but that's the big one.
that would be my,
They need a
So based on,
understand that.
We're not here to discuss the variance.
I understand that too.
But to give you a concept plan of how it would fit in, we have a variance plan. Okay? Because
so-
I anticipated this.
based on your comments from the last meeting, I know you guys had mentioned wanting the driveway off of Silver Hill. I guess I assumed that you meant the actual Silver Hill and not the, but that's the orientation of the house. So certainly, that's the orientation that they would be looking for when and if we go for a variance. So we would basically just take this
And reverse it.
well, I think what our preference would be is to probably make this a side entrance garage so that the driveway comes out and then down onto Silver Hill.
That's pretty dangerous.
Would be my guess.
But you're gonna have to get the highway surveyor to approve a
I
driveway
mean,
to get on a road that he
everybody's
doesn't wanna
traveling
maintain.
Nobody travels on this.
It's a valid point.
Yeah, I'm not sure
So I
that
wouldn't
that's,
get into
I'm
that.
just-
I
I-
would get into the driveway.
I
What
let,
road does he want to maintain?
Silver Hill.
He doesn't maintain it presently.
Maintaining.
There's a guardrail crossing it off.
But I wouldn't get into the
There's a
driveway.
curb,
This is what you
this is, this
That's
is,
what she's,
this is what we were showing.
Yes, and that makes sense. But
So-
I wouldn't get into that now. 'cause
Right, I agreed. I just wanted to show the orientation of the house. This is the front of the house, it was our intention to face it towards Silver Hill. That was, we can determine where the driveway
Any
goes
other-
exactly later.
well, we can't, it's not
That's
for
not-
purview right now anyway, so. Any other questions on this from the board? Not hearing any, this is a public hearing. Are there people in the audience that would like to speak on this? Please come up. Name and address, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Allegrezza. Judy and I live at 254 Congress Street, which is directly across the street from this. You are talking about the lot itself. I mean, everybody here from that area was told that nobody would ever build on that lot, be that as it may. But there are certain concerns we have, or at least I have, that I'd like to bring up. One is, this is a highly traveled road. If in the morning, it's nonstop traffic. 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, nonstop traffic. We have had several accidents. It's like 1 or 2 accidents a year. The pole in front of my house was sheared off. A pole up the street has been sheared off. So traffic safety is a big concern for us, and it should be a concern for the town as well. And I was wondering if there were plans to have some entity of the town do a safety survey to see what exactly impact is going to have on us. The idea of coming up Silver Hill and taking a left to get into that road is, pardon my English, crazy. I mean, people come around from Congress Street, they take that right nonstop, all the time. It's very common to hear screeching, yelling, beeping at that corner. That would be, in my opinion, a non-starter. So that has to be looked at. It's not clear what's going to happen to that road. Are you going to open it up again? Then I can tell you, people are going to come down Congress Street.
This doesn't do any of that.
Well,
That's not gonna
then
happen.
you are not making it a road, you're making it a private driveway for the owners.
No, we're not.
Nope.
We're not doing any of that.
Well, it sounds like it.
This
No, we
subdivision
can't-
formally establishes property lines
yeah.
for the property that's been there for however many, 50, 70 years or more. All this does is formalize what's been happening informally all these years. This should have been done back when the roads went through and they were assuming they had a buildable lot. Well, they didn't have a buildable lot because they didn't do this.
Well, it
This
seems to
isn't
me-
changing anything on the ground at all. It's not changing the roadways at all.
No, but what you are changing is the history of that lot over the last 30 years at least. You are saying, well, maybe we should have done something 30 years ago, but now the history of it and the consensus of people who live there is this is the way it is. And why are you changing that? For what reason?
Because the owner wants to sell the property and do
Well,
something.
there's other owners up there as well, and
But they're not the owners of that land. Unfortunately, they have the right to develop their land. I don't think there's anybody on this board that necessarily agrees with this or would like to see this happen, but we're bound by certain legal things that we need to do. And effectively, all this is doing is defining that piece of property, which is the question why I asked as to whether it's a buildable lot or not, because it doesn't meet current zoning or not, and that was my question as to whether it did or didn't. But they certainly have the right to define what their property is, and that's what this attempt is. Because if you go back through and just to try to bring some history into this, what we found when this came forward is obviously Congress Street is defined in its current location. As you fronted, your front yard is defined. The old Silver Hill, that curve, is actually the old road in Milford. If you go back to pre-1960, 1950 something, that was Silver Hill Road. The section that was in front of the old Capitos Farm was never defined. There was never any definition of that land that we could find.
dirt road, right?
So what happens is there was never a definition of what that parcel was exactly. We could never find any of that. So this is an attempt to now define that parcel. And that's what they're coming forward to us for. And unfortunately, as part of that, as Attorney Antonellis has stated, based on the fact that if the town established a parcel that was over 5,000 square feet, and we effectively landlocked that parcel within those 3 streets, it becomes a buildable lot. I'm not sure that I totally buy into that, and that's why I asked that we get town council to comment, but effectively, it all revolves around that and the definition of what that parcel is. And so this is the first time that we've seen a plan that defines Silver Hill Road from the old Silver Hill Road, the old curve section, up to Congress Street. And what they did, just so everybody knows, is they took the right-of-way width of Silver Hill Road south of the curve section, pretty much, and carried that up through. And they connected it into the right-of-way of which is defined of the old Silver Hill and Congress Street, and brought that up and then tied in with a radius up at the top. So that's what this process is, and that's what it's doing. Unfortunately, we're bound by those things to try to figure out what we have out there.
And there's a section of the state subdivision control law that specifically provides for this kind of thing. It's a single lot definitive plan. It's not creating a whole bunch of lots and a whole bunch of new roads. It's based on where old existing roads have been, and property has been established, in this case, has been severed from all the rest of the land that it used to go with.
There's no statute of limitations on that?
No. So what this does now is what should have been done then. And I can never.
Nunc pro tunc.
Thank you. I can never remember the Latin phrase. But it's now for them. This fixes the problem. It doesn't change anything physically. It changes it legally so that now it properly exists. Everything that even the town assessors have been drawing it. The engineering firm that used to draw the assessor's maps by hand drew it out as a lot. Everybody thought it was a lot. But guess what? Nobody followed the proper process way back when, so it's been sitting there all that time as a piece of land.
The town showed it as something.
Right.
The town didn't assess it as a building lot in the town of Milford, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But it assessed it as a piece of property.
Well, yeah, but it's drawn out as if.
But it's
it
drawn
were
out as
platted.
that, yes, I agree.
But it's never been platted. This plats it. That's the formal legal process of
Well, what you're saying is that it wasn't a legal entity as a buildable lot because they didn't pay taxes on a buildable lot.
No, I'm saying the town, I think, again, because we don't have a legal as to what it was or wasn't, everybody assumed it was open space. It wasn't taxed. If you go to the assessors and you look at what the price of a lot in Milford is and what it's assessed at now, it's not assessed that way. But I don't know that the town knew any better as to whether it was or wasn't, to be totally honest. I can only comment on what those numbers are. That's not really in our purview. But I did look it up to see, hey, did the assessors think this was a lot? No, I don't believe they did. Whether that was right or wrong, I can't tell you either. That'll follow part of this process.
Just one last question. But you are going to ask the town council for a legal opinion?
Yeah.
You'll bring
Well,
us-
I'm saying that we should do that, yes.
Well, I think you should. Oh, okay. I accept
Yeah,
my-
other comments? Yes?
Question, I'm Tony's wife. Do the Capitos actually have clear title to this property that they wish to sell? If they haven't paid adequate taxes on it, and it hasn't been assessed correctly?
They've paid the taxes that
But they paid taxes with the idea it was not a development.
again,
How
that's
can they
beyond.
then
know what they
change
pay
that
taxes on. We
designation?
don't know
I
that.
can only tell you what it was.
We don't know
assessed
that.
at in the stop process. That's,
They have clear title.
We don't know what their expectation. I'm not going down the path of how they thought this lot was intended. That's not for this board to say. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry.
The problem we have with Walden Woods was caused by inadequate attention to detail. And this could happen again here.
We're not the Board of Assessors. I don't know how this was assessed, and I don't know how the Capitoses viewed this lot.
They have a clear title in this land, that's my question.
They've been paying taxes all along because
There-
it's still in their possession, so I'm assuming they've been paying taxes.
There have been multiple title examinations done. They have clear and marketable title to the lot, and to the best of my knowledge, they've paid all of the taxes that have been assessed to this land.
any other questions?
I'm Fred Oldfield, and I live at 246 Congress Street. I'm very familiar with the boards over the years. I've done a number of projects, both in single families, duplexes, and subdivisions. And I think, looking at this, personally, I think the town council needs to give us an opinion before you move forward with any future direction on this. It's a very small lot. How big is the house gonna be that's gonna be on it? What's the square footage?
Well, it
Doesn't matter.
it
It's
depends.
irrelevant.
Yeah, it doesn't-
Doesn't matter.
They may ask for a zoning variance afterwards. It really doesn't, it's immaterial to what we're doing. We're creating a lot. The lot size would be known. That's the only thing that we do know.
Oh, I know
Well,
that.
as I heard previously.
350 a
the
side.
Residences in this area are fairly decent and good-sized homes. One of the things that I would be concerned about is you put a small cottage-type box on the house, and then what does it do to the valuations of the existing homes? That would be of concern to me. I picked this area because I felt it was a decent area to build, and the neighborhood is a very good neighborhood. And it's not saying that the people that would buy this house, if it goes through, wouldn't be good neighbors. However, I'm concerned about the valuations too. So I think if you could have the town council make a final determination, that would help a lot in my thinking. So.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes. Where would the
Please
front
come
of
up,
this
please.
house face?
It's irrelevant.
We can't,
It's a question.
yeah, but we can't,
Can't tell.
We can't determine
this has
that.
got nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with that, but
No.
it has to do with evaluation. Has to do with evaluation with
That
budding
has nothing to
properties.
do with it.
But if they want to move it,
That house is gonna face somebody,
if they want to move it,
unless they're gonna
They can
crank
face
it
it
and move it
however,
every
they
day.
can stand
they
on its
could.
roof.
They have every right to
Yeah,
do
they have
that.
every right to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not fair to the neighbors.
But that's,
Well, you should have bought it.
there's nothing that we can do about that. People have the right to put the house wherever they want within the zoning of the town.
Within the zoning.
So that's something that we can't deal with.
Right.
The question is whether that's what the lot looks like or not, is effectively what's in front of us, and whether town council believes that, based on state law, that because of the way it was created, it is a building lot, because it doesn't meet current zoning in the town. What's left doesn't meet zoning. It becomes a matter of, because of the way it was created, doesn't meet state law that it was grandfathered in, effectively, the famed word, as a lot in the town of Milford. Yep, please come up.
Just a short one. I'll talk louder. What recourse is there to people who are dissatisfied with whatever decision you come up with? Is it town meeting, town selectmen, or no, there's no?
I believe you can, depending on the decision as to whether it's a buildable lot or not, you could go, and I'm not sure that we have legal, but I would believe they could go to land court with it, and
Yeah, well, they can appeal the subdivision decision, just like any other subdivision.
so you would be able to appeal the decision.
Another question, this is used for drainage. That thing is a sponge. It absorbs water that directs itself to go down Silver Hill Road.
Has nothing
On
to
the
do-
left side, facing down the road, there are no drainage pumps. But on the
That-
right
that-
side,
that-
there are some pumps,
Can't
and
do
there's a
anything
brook
about
down there.
There's
Remember that
nothing,
brook and all
there's,
the problems you had with that?
this is an existing lot. If this goes through, this is just like any other existing lot, the town doesn't deal with any of those issues as part of that, no.
Sad.
What do you want to do?
You know, if you have a piece of property in Milford, if you have a piece of property in Milford and you follow along all the zoning and so forth, you have every right to build on it.
December 18th.
And so this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure this out ourselves. But you
And after
can't
the
say he
zoning
can't build there. He has every right as long as he follows all the zoning rules. That's the bottom line.
13th.
I think,
I'll withdraw
yes.
it.
I believe the 13th.
13th, I think.
There,
We continue.
anything else? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion, we continue the public hearing.
Motion been made to continue the
December
public hearing
13th.
by
I know.
John, seconded by Babe, Larry. And again, I think our reasoning is to correct for the radius and then to get an opinion by town council. So, just so that's clear.
Yeah, so the difference would be, town council agrees with Attorney Antonellis, there's no note necessary on the plan.
Correct. And if
he
doesn't, then
there'll
effectively
be
I want a
on
note
the
that says
plan.
not to be considered a buildable
Just
lot.
says it's not a buildable lot, and that would be added to the variance request.
Yep. All those in favor of continuing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous at 5. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving right
Do
along.
the 81P or no?
No, 81P.
There isn't one here?
No.
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Thanks, Liz.
It's a land court.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Nice to see you, Minnie. Good, have a happy Thanksgiving, my friend, huh? Take care of yourself.
What's this kiss? I'm not kissing you.
That's okay, because this, I think Charlie
They're coming back here.
He'll be back here.
agrees with us.
It's continued. A public hearing is continued.
There's nothing in front of zoning right
It
now.
might not.
He took the Walden Woods.
That, right now. Well,
Because they're not gonna get more continuances, so I'm gonna send them all notices. I agree with the zoning.
What's he doing? He's gonna withdraw it?
the one that's in front of zoning right now, they're going to withdraw.
Oh, okay.
So there's nothing,
Oh, okay, all right.
You should get a notice.
Well, we have it in the past, we got one in the past, and we've continued about 4 times.
Peter Lavoy is here.
Yeah.
Why we're gonna be with.
But I said I would send them all.
I know that's what it is.
We miss seeing you.
When the crowd moved out,
preliminary plan for 109 Depot Street.
This one here, this piece of property is,
You skipping the 81P?
There is none.
I already asked that question.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
hi, how are you? Thank you.
Before you start doing your presentation, we'll wait for Larry to come back. More because he's also taking our meeting minutes too.
Oh, the wetlands.
Is I too loud?
No, we're just waiting, we're waiting for Larry.
Oh, waiting for Larry? I'm sorry, I apologize. I can be loud sometimes.
No, we didn't catch you this time, Joe.
I told someone that in Bellingham once, they asked the question, the planning board asked a question about the sound bylaw in town of Bellingham. And the sound engineer said, well, if Mr. Antonellis had just made this presentation outside in the parking lot, then he would be in violation of the town zoning.
Oh, God. That's funny.
Well, speak clearly.
Well, Larry probably knows what it is, and I'm sure he knows your name, so we'll start and then we'll see what happens. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. George Michov, Guerrier and Helnan, here to present subdivision, preliminary subdivision plan for a subdivision on 109 Depot Street. Currently, we have 3 parcels, 164, 164C, and 43. And the applicant would like to propose a subdivision that will have 4 parcels, 4 lots, and it will have 386 feet of a road ending in a cul-de-sac.
How many feet of road, I'm sorry?
386.
386, okay.
And we will have 4 lots. Each one of them would have sufficient frontage. Also a shape factor that is compliant with the bylaws. And this is the whole subdivision would be served by town utilities. We will have
These single-family homes.
sewer going to Depot Street, and we would have drainage system that would go to a small detention pond and then be released. The runoff would be released.
Is that dumping back into Depot Street? Is that the plan, to dump into the drainage system in Depot Street?
No, to the wetlands behind.
Okay.
There's a lot of wetlands.
And we would also like to ask for 2 waivers, one for the sidewalk. I know that you had a massive presentation.
It's not gonna happen, go ahead. What's your second one?
Let me present much shorter why
Hey, what's
we
your second
believe
one?
that we can go without a sidewalk. The sidewalk would basically serve only those 2 lots, and it would not make much.
Makes perfect sense. To me, I'm looking at this real quick. I see that the lot size, I can't read what lot size 1 reads, but I see that you're looking at 16, which is the minimum requirement for a duplex.
Right.
Then we jump up to 22, then we go to, what's that, 40,000? Again, I can't read what lot 1 lot size is, but I'm assuming it's greater than 16. So we all know you're putting in duplexes. With that said, I also can assume the kids are gonna be there. With that said, Depot Street is very well traveled. Yeah, I'm sorry, you're gonna have a sidewalk, and it's gonna be wide enough for those kids that are school age to be sitting there waiting for the school bus. So that's my 2 cents on that. What that, and I kept
Request
saying,
for the other waiver? What was the second waiver request?
We would like to request a sloped curbing versus.
No, that's not gonna happen
All right,
either.
we'll deal with them as they come. Keeps. Any others in the presentation?
Where the hell is that?
Any other?
Any other part of the presentation?
Well, that's pretty much it, unless you have questions.
Okay, I'll read, yeah, I'm just gonna read in the letters that we received. Letter from the town planner. Applicant is proposing a 4-lot subdivision, 3.43 acres. Following waivers were requested, as noted on the plan: waiver of sidewalk requirement, waiver of vertical granite curbing. A formal waiver request will be needed at the definitive plan stage. We may be able to short-circuit that. I have reviewed the proposed plan revised through 10/16/18 and note the following deficiencies. Is that the same plan, 10/16/18? Nonconformity on lot 52-0-164 not addressed, variances will be needed. House on adjacent lot not shown. Parcel ID and owner's info not shown or incorrect on adjacent lots. Existing house on lot 54-043 not shown. Parallel driveways for proposed lots 1 and 2 should be one shared driveway. Proposed 8-foot high retaining wall within new street right-of-way adjacent to pavement. Lot lines and building locations for proposed lots 1 and 2 should be modified to minimize separation from existing adjacent homes. Therefore, I recommend the preliminary plan be approved only if all the deficiencies and agency comments can be adequately addressed. Just in comment on that, I mean, we can not approve the preliminary plan and you can move forward anyway, so it really doesn't matter. You know, it's more for comment than anything else, but at least that way you know the comments from the town boards. Letter from the town engineer. Submittal of preliminary plan, parcel associated with existing house located at 109 Depot and 75 Fruit Street. Following review comments, preliminary plan lists the requested waivers. I won't go through that in any more detail, we've already talked about that. Assessors map references associated with 3 parcels should be added. The plan should show the distance from the proposed center line of the proposed roadway to the center line of the existing intersecting streets. The closest distances to Pullet Circle. That's the closest one?
That's the one on this side, yes.
Okay. It appears there is an existing house to be raised at 109 Depot Street, and that should be shown on any definitive plan. It doesn't appear that the proposed grading associated with the proposed roadway meets the standard cross-section requirements. It appears there is a 4 to 8 foot high retaining wall within the proposed right-of-way at approximately station 2+60 plus 3+20. The lot and house to remain associated with 75 Fruit Street should be labeled. The new lot area and shape factor of the same lot and its nonconformity should be further discussed in terms of addressing additional requirements for permitting prior to the definitive subdivision plan. Highway surveyor had no comments. Fire department. The driveway of the 2 parcels, of the last 2 parcels, must include an analysis and evaluation of fire apparatus maneuvering through the access road created by swept path analysis and turn simulation software by a registered professional engineer. I don't know how you're gonna get in there and turn any type of analysis to get in there. Yeah, I'm not sure that if he wants you to do turning analysis, that you'd ever pass that, but that's besides the point. Approval to the access road shall be subject to the AHJ and capable of supporting the imposed loads of fire apparatus and shall be provided with an all-weather driving surface. Approval of the access roads.
Means the driveways.
Also driveways.
Oh, those
the
driveways
driveways.
because of the length, okay.
Yep.
The proposed hydrant should be located between the first 2 proposed buildings. Hydrant should be located approximately 150 feet closer to the circle. Milford Water Company,
Look at the bottom one, that's the most relevant.
yeah, well, the same as usual,
Yep.
no new services, we're gonna keep sending you letters that have nothing to do with us.
Yep.
And then we just have the permits. Those are the agency comments. That'll open it up to members of the board for their comments, concerns. Anything, Pat?
No, I think that
again, just in staying in sync with what Larry and Mike had written, and that you've already addressed it. You can go ahead with the definitive regardless of the
Right.
preliminary.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, I'll just say this quickly, I'm not looking to grant any waivers, and I won't. With that said, I mean, at least I applaud them that they're not looking for any type of waivers in terms of zoning variances to get duplexes. At least they laid them out consistently with what the bylaw reads, so I give you credit for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm fair, I mean, that's what the bylaw reads, I'm fine with it.
I just wanted to know about the house that you're gonna raise. Where, is that on the plan here?
It is not shown
No,
here.
it's not shown.
It's a preliminary plan. It's located approximately here.
Was that the house that was burnt down at one time? Was there a fire in that house? Is that the one?
Currently, it's not burned
You don't
down.
know.
I
Okay.
don't know of any fire history
Yeah,
for the
because there
house.
was a fire there. The reason I tell you, because I live on that street.
It's
All right.
on, it's on, the
It's
building's
not on that,
well,
it's not
no.
on Fruit Street.
It's on
I know
Depot.
that, it's on Depot. Okay. I was just curious
I
about,
think it is that.
huh?
I think it is the house that
It was the house that, because there was a fire in that particular house, and they just left it there, yeah. There's a lot of wetlands all around that
Yes,
whole
correct.
area.
Yes,
Yeah, the
the
wetlands
wetlands are.
Yeah, that big area, I saw it on the, yeah.
The only comment I
Yes.
got is the one that Pat has. You're gonna put in straight granite curbing, and you're gonna put sidewalks.
They can request a waiver, I mean,
Well,
obviously, but
I had to ask.
I think I think you probably got the feeling of the board that those probably aren't gonna fly, but that's up to you. John?
No.
If it was up to us, we wouldn't have asked for the waiver in the first place.
Well, you can even ask at the preliminary stage if
You
you
can
want, but
stay
then you're probably
consistent,
gonna
I'm
end up
gonna stay
redrawing
consistent.
drawings. With that, I'll entertain a motion to,
Yeah, I make a
Whatever.
motion, we approve the preliminary plan.
Subject,
subject to the
Subject to
agency
Comments.
comments that we
comments
received.
of the agencies.
I'd only ask that you go one step further and suggest that you're not amenable or amenable to the two requested
Variances.
variance
Variances.
requests.
Yes, absolutely.
The waivers, rather, because again,
That's a good point.
let's stay on topic.
Just in case I didn't.
I don't want to hear, wow, I don't want to hear. You didn't officially tell us no.
The answer is no.
The answer is no.
Motion to
Quick
approve the
catch it.
preliminary plan, subject to the agency comments, and to not granting the,
Any way.
Two waiver
any
requests.
waivers, the waivers requested as part
Second.
of the preliminary plan.
I'll second it.
Seconded by, I got Pat. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous at 5.
Take this, show this to Pat.
Thank you.
This is the longest we've been here. I know, John.
Site plan review.
That's my
I'm off at 5, whatever they're
Two.
doing. 5. No, we're doing 4.
Trader.
Larry, I'm recusing on 5. I don't even know what it is, but
Site plan review for Eastland Partners, Inc., 28 Birch Street.
ooh, colors. Got a lot of colors, my friend. Oh, there they are, thanks.
How's everything going, Pete?
Good.
Yeah, very good.
Office building.
Hard to believe that you could build anything back there.
Yeah.
Really is hard to believe.
Surprising.
Oh, look at this, Jesus God. I got more than I need.
All yours.
All mine. Good evening, my name's Peter Lavoy. I work with Turning Point Engineering. I'm here tonight representing Eastland Partners. The project's located at 28 Birch Street. 109 is at the top of your page. Beaver Street is down at your bottom. And the fire station is right there in this location here. We have an existing 2.3 acre lot right here, which is vacant. It's wooded. Basically, what we want to do is we want to construct a roughly 7,400 square foot building, one-story office building. We have 48 parking spaces, which is more than what's required, but if this does go medical, it does meet the parking for a medical office building. We have 2 curb cuts right here and right here. Basically, you come in, parking here, dumpster location right there. Sewer, we have sewer coming down and tying into Birch Street and then going down Birch Street. I was in front of the sewer board this evening and they did approve the plan. We have water that's going to be also connected to Birch Street and as well as gas over here. Drainage, none of the site's runoff will go out onto Birch Street. It's all going to stay on the site. We have an existing HydroWorks unit, catch basin right here, which is basically like a storm scepter. Treats the runoff from this, there's a high point right here, basically collects this and goes into that HydroWorks unit, which then goes into a 4-bay and then into a water quality structure, and that is mitigated before it goes into the wetlands. There is wetlands around the back of this parcel. The second side of the parking area goes into another HydroWorks unit, into a 4-bay, and then into a water quality basin. The roof right here will be collected by downspouts along the back. And also there are 2 drop inlets or grass catch basins to collect the runoff in that grass. And it's going to be infiltrated into this underground chamber underneath the parking area. That's it. We are going in front of conservation on the 28th. And I have talked to DEP already regarding this site, so DEP's all set with it. But that's it. Any questions?
I'll read the comments into the minutes. Town planner. The applicant requests site plan approval for a 7,450 square foot office building on the subject property. The required 48 off-street parking spaces are being provided with 2 curb cuts on Birch Street. The required landscaping plan is yet to be submitted. All other applicable zoning and site plan requirements appear to be met. Therefore, I approve approval subject to relevant agency comments. Town engineer has 2 comments. Set of plans reference landscaping plan, which is same as Larry's. Drainage calculations and stormwater report. Section B certification is not stamped by a registered engineer as required. Highway Department. I would like to recommend to the applicant that any road opening curb cut permits and transcripts must be obtained in the Milford Highway Department. Nothing there. Water company, exactly the same letter, except a different address. Again, they're not doing any new connections until Bill Street Wellfield comes back online. Fire department recommends that no parking fire lane are added to the east side of the parking area. Did you see this one, Peter, before?
Yes, I
Have you
did.
done that?
I added that, the no parking fire lane. I also submitted the landscape plan. Mike and Larry I sent them both PDFs. And I also sent Mike a new drainage report that was stamped.
Council on Disability has no comments, and that was the agency comments that we received. Questions, comments from the board?
I didn't, I know you said you had been to the sewer board tonight. I was reading and didn't pay attention to what you said. You could just say,
Oh, the sewer board approved the site plan tonight. I was there this evening.
A letter will follow.
I would think so. I could ask.
Eventually.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
No, I'm good.
Motion.
Motion to approve, subject to the,
Subject to relevant agency comment.
the only thing that I guess is outstanding is, they've seen the landscaping plan, but we haven't seen the landscaping plan to review the plan.
I have it right here if you want it.
Well, I think the
Subject
intent is.
subject to Mike's approval of the landscaping.
It was done by a landscape architect, and he did follow the it's the last sheet,
All the
Larry.
rules.
It's stamped by a registered landscaper.
Look at the air.
Yeah, that being said, there's still a requirement that the town
Okay.
review it.
That's fine.
Again, subject to Mike's approval, review and approval.
I know it.
Motion to approve the site plan, subject to the approval of the department comments and the approval of the landscaping plan once they have a chance to review it. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by John. I heard him
Oh,
first.
okay, that's okay, whatever.
I just mumble, I don't.
That's
Any
John,
other
I don't-
discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the approval of the site plan, subject to the comments?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous at 5.
Thank you.
Here's all this.
Thank you.
Oh, I know, I saw that. Is this yours or mine?
Larry? You set for the next one?
We're on the last one. Two? I thought it was.
Amended site plan for One Industrial Roads, Sierra Naturals, Inc.
We got three now.
Yes.
It's a late night there, guys.
It is. It was an early morning and an earlier one tomorrow. So collectively.
Where's your helper? Where's your helper?
I saw him at Lowe's. He wasn't too, he wasn't too pleasant. He wasn't too pleasant, Joe. He didn't pass himself along like you do.
Really, he wasn't pleasant?
No.
I'll have to teach him a little more. So the three of us tonight are George, who you know, Jeremy Hendrickson,
Yeah.
who you may remember, who was here before, and Joe Antonellis, who I know you remember. Okay, and so we're here tonight on behalf of Sierra Natural, our collective clients, to provide you with a amended site plan showing an expansion of the greenhouse that we intend to build there. So I'll let George take you through the changes. And Jeremy is here to answer any technical questions about the building or the site, because he's in charge of that.
So the main change was the building was increased by 10,000 square feet. Parking lot remained with the same number of parking spots. Last time we met, when you approved the initial site plan, you requested an area for snow storage, and we provided this area here. Also, when the building was, the size of the building expanded, we moved the entire development forward, and the site the zone has 50 feet front setback, but this site had previously approved waiver for 30-foot setback, and we used this feature of the site and moved everything forward. Again, this is something that you've already seen. We have landscape screening, we have the building, 15 parking spots, parking area, 2 detention basins, and the storm runoff goes off the building through downspouts, follows swale, water quality swale, and then it goes into the detention basin. The runoff from the parking area goes into the smaller detention basin, and they're released in a controlled manner. One of the comments from the town engineer was that he would like to see check dams, which we provided at various spots during in the water quality swales. He also requested the water quality swale to be formalized and detail to be provided, which we did. And this would be the water quality swale detail. So that's pretty much everything that is new on the site.
Water and sewer?
sewer, it will connect to town sewer, and water, I discussed with the water company connected to the Birch Street water, since Industrial Road was relatively recently paved.
I read agency comments in. Larry's comments. Modification of a previously approved site plan now utilizes the variances approved by the ZBA on 7/13/17. Proposed use is permitted in this zone only for an entity that was licensed or registered by the state and approved to operate in Milford prior to July 1, 2017 as a medical marijuana treatment center. Sierra Naturals meets those requirements. 15 off-street parking spaces are required and are being provided adjacent to the building at the northeasterly portion of the site. All applicable zoning site plan requirements have been met, therefore Larry recommends approval. Town engineer, the submittal is essentially the same submittal that was approved September 2018. The changes of the proposed building greenhouse is approximately 10,000 square feet larger than the original. The proposed location of the building greenhouse utilizes the variance that was granted to allow the 30-foot setback. Recommends approval. Highway surveyor. This addresses the industrial road, five-year moratorium, so the water has to come in off of Birch. Fire department.
The
The
water's
applicant
already-
agreed
Joe,
to-
the water's already there. It's already stubbed off.
At the site?
Yeah. They did it before they did the road.
Oh, okay.
Scotty should remember that.
Well,
Just saying.
well, in that case, you may not have to go down to Birch Street, but.
Okay.
The Council on Disability has no comments. The Fire Department recommends a no parking fire lane on the paved travel lanes of the parking areas. The areas to indicate fire lanes would be between the 12 parking spaces in front of the building and in front of the 4 spaces furthest from the building. The applicant agreed to install a pedestrian gate for rear access to the building and necessary key safes.
Yes, correct.
Yep. That's on.
This is,
Okay. And that was it for agency comments. Questions, comments from the board?
I move we approve the plan.
I'll second that.
Motion by John to approve the amended site plan, seconded by Lena. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the amended site plan will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous at 4, there was 1 abstention.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays. Good to see you again. Thanks. Careful out there. Anything going north is black ice, so.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, my wife came back from Worcester, she texted me.
What? Did you say it's
Black ice
icy?
outside.
Black ice.
Black ice coming from north.
That just
It
means
is,
go
it's
faster
Scotty's
so you can
gift.
whack off something.
Ah,
All right, let's continue so we can get out of here.
2 new hips.
ZBA special permit. OHM Shiv LLC, 42 to 46 Main Street, map 1, lot 6, CB zone.
Okay.
Oh. No one here for that one?
Oh.
I'll read Larry's comments and then. The applicant requests a special permit to add 2 additional apartments to the mixed-use commercial building on the subject property. The units would replace existing commercial space on the first floor. This application is incomplete as no site plan has been submitted and the building floor plans do not clearly and accurately depict the current use of the areas within the building. The building contains 12 apartments consisting of 4 2-bedroom units, 6 one-bedroom unit, and 2 two-bedroom units. This has been a problem property for a number of years in terms of overcrowding and the types and numbers of residential uses on the 2nd and 3rd floor. To allow for the conversion of first-floor commercial to more residential units is ill-advised. I recommend unfavorable.
Make a motion for unfavorable. It's right across the street, I
This
think.
is- this is
I think
the one
it-
right over
Right
here, yeah.
across the street.
I'll second
I
it.
think we all know the history of this
Yes,
building.
we do.
Motion
You
been
can
made to
continue
send,
reading on, but I don't think there was a sense
Motion been
to
made
it.
to send an unfavorable recommendation to the ZBA, seconded by,
you
that
don't
was by
want it.
Pat, seconded by Lena. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of sending an unfavorable to the ZBA will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous at 5. ZBA variance Imperial Hyundai, 154 East Main Street, map 33, lots 35, 36, 37, 38, in the CB zone. You here for that, Joe?
Yes.
Then why don't you go ahead before I read the...
Yes, well, this is a request for a variance to allow for the cars to be able to be manipulated onto Hamilton Street without a curb being there.
Didn't we close up that curb?
Okay, back up for a second.
But the variance.
Isn't there a landscape?
No, it's
Buff-
excuse me, it's to remove the
Oh,
landscape.
okay, that's what messed me up.
Larry-
That's what messed me up,
Larry
I'm
looked
sorry.
at me because I said it the wrong way to him the other day also, so I have it in my mind wrong. So it's to request for the waiver of the landscape buffer.
To remove the landscape buffer and allow for vehicle display.
Yes.
Okay. Because the way you said that didn't
Well,
make any sense.
No, I know, I didn't.
Okay.
It's late.
I missed that,
I
Joe.
apologize. The request is to remove the landscape buffer that was set forth, that's in the bylaw and part of the approved site plan.
Oh, okay.
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 With that, I will read Larry's comments. Applicant requests a variance to remove the previously approved and installed landscape buffer area along the Hamilton Street frontage of the subject property. Site plan approved by the planning board in 2015 for this site required that the frontage along Hamilton Street be limited to 2 driveways, with the remaining Hamilton Street frontage being developed with a landscape buffer. Similarly, in 2015, both the planning board and the zoning board of appeals severely limited O'Reilly Auto Parts to only 1 driveway along the westerly Hamilton Street frontage. In January of 2017, the planning board approved the current site plan for the Hyundai dealership, which retained the driveway and landscape buffer configuration previously approved along Hamilton Street. These actions resulted in the clear, visible definition of Hamilton Street, which is a public way. For public safety purposes, the zoning bylaw provides for limiting driveway curb cuts to 1 driveway per 200 feet of street frontage in commercial districts. In addition, the bylaw also prohibits vehicles backing into the public way. These public safety requirements are in turn reinforced with the landscape buffer requirements. There's absolutely no hardship whatsoever related to the property with regard to the landscaping along Hamilton Street. The current approved site plan provides more than sufficient circulation, parking, and display area on the 2.7-acre site to operate the dealership while maintaining public safety along both Hamilton and East Main Streets. Therefore, I recommend unfavorable to the zoning board of appeals.
Do you have anything to add, Joe? Make a motion for unfavorable. I agree with Larry on this one.
Second.
Motion by Pat to send an unfavorable recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, seconded by John. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Sure.
One, the idea of O'Reilly's, we did not limit O'Reilly's to one thing. The planning board
ZBA
had
did.
agreed to have the opening on Hamilton Street for O'Reilly's. It was the zoning board who limited the thing. We had agreed that it should be the other way around. Again, I think with the Hamilton Street going in, turning in, and being one way, I think this would be a better situation for it because of the snow plowing situation. Where they would clear it out and clean it out, and not in Hamilton Street, we would be just as wide as you're turning into that area of Hamilton Street and O'Reilly's. And I think to eliminate just a small landscape area, and hopefully during the if it's approved, the site plan, we could have some kind of a landscape area that Pat and I had talked about before, up against the building or somewhere in there, rather than do it. But I think putting the landscape area in that area is it's not necessary.
But it's already
I think-
there, babe.
What's that?
It's there now.
It's there now.
It's there now.
It's there now, they're
It is
just
there.
parking on it.
There is a grass strip there now.
I understand.
And I think personally, I think it defines Hamilton Street, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And what they're asking to do is remove that grass strip, which they're parking on, and just, and be able to go back to the old way.
I drive by there, I don't even know, I don't even see it.
The cars, and you
Yeah,
don't,
so
if you take the cars off the grass strip,
Well,
there is actually
again-
a definement if you can see where Hamilton
Yeah.
Street is now after all these years.
Again, I
would like to say one other thing.
I think just the safety aspect of the snow plowing situation would be a lot better without it, and that's my
I also think there needs to be a distinction about cars backing out onto a public way. I think that is more a bylaw that's more attendant to a parking lot where there is continual access to and from the thing backing out into a parking lot way. This is a automobile dealership, and so if a car were to back out onto the public way, it's under supervision, and it's not done on a regular basis.
I don't disagree with you, Joe. My concern isn't for cars backing up. My concern is that I actually appreciate right now that there's a grass strip, and it shows a definement after all these years of where Hamilton Street really actually lays out. That's more my appeal. I don't, look, it's a one-way street. Because it's a one-way street, it's not even, and you gotta stop every 16 feet. I mean, it's just,
Yes, I'll
that's
save.
not my concern.
I'll save my argument for the zoning board.
Attaboy.
So I know it's late, and,
Yeah.
and happy holiday, happy Thanksgiving,
Still,
everybody.
I'll support still
Thank
my
you.
unfavorable.
Any further discussion by the board? Hearing none, all those in favor of sending an unfavorable recommendation to
Aye.
the zoning board, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay,
you.
thank you.
4 in favor, 1 opposed.
Happy Thanksgiving,
Happy
Joe.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Drive safely.
Safe tonight for
Drive
everybody.
safe.
Oh, is it? It's that bad out, huh?
With that, I'll entertain a motion to.
Motion to
close
adjourn.
the meeting.
I'll make a motion to
the meeting,
adjourn.
Seconded by Lena, all those in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye, opposed? Unanimous at 5.
I'm driving again.